Judith chapter 1. It was the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians in the great city of Nineveh. At the time, Arphaxad was ruling over the Medes and Ecbatana. Around Ecbatana he built a wall of hewn stones, 3 cubits thick and 6 cubits long. He made the wall 70 cubits high and 50 cubits wide. At its gates he raised towers 100 cubits high with foundations 60 cubits wide. He made its gates 70 cubits high and 40 cubits wide to allow passage of his mighty forces, with his infantry in formation. At that time King Nebuchadnezzar waged war against King Arphaxad in the vast plain that borders Ragau. Rallying to him were all who lived in the hill country, all who lived along the Euphrates and the Hydaspes, as well as Arioch, king of the Elamites, in the plains. Thus many nations joined the ranks of the Chelodites. Then Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, contacted all the inhabitants of Persia and all who lived in the west, the inhabitants of Sicilia and Damascus, Lebanon and Antelebanon, and all who lived along the seacoast, the peoples of Carmel, Gilead, Upper Galilee, and the vast plain of Esdraelon, and all in Samaria and its cities, and west of the Jordan, as far as Jerusalem, Bethany, Chelos, Kadesh, and the river of Egypt, Tapahes, Ramses, all the land of Goshen, Tanis, Memphis, and beyond, and all the inhabitants of Egypt as far as the borders of Ethiopia. But all the inhabitants of the whole land made light of the summons of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, and would not join him in the war. They were not afraid of him, since he was only a single opponent. So they sent back his envoys empty-handed and disgraced. Then Nebuchadnezzar fell into a violent rage against all the land, and swore by his throne and his kingdom that he would take revenge on all the territories of Sicilia, Damascus, and Syria, and would destroy with his sword all the inhabitants of Moab, Ammon, the whole of Judea, and all those living in Egypt, as far as the coast of the 2 seas. In the 17th year he mustered his forces against King Arphaxad, and was made victorious in his campaign. He routed the whole force of Arphaxad, his entire cavalry, and all his chariots, and took possession of his cities. He pressed on to Ecbatana, took its towers, sacked its marketplaces, and turned its glory into shame. He captured Arphaxad in the mountains of Ragau, ran him through with spears, and utterly destroyed him once and for all. Then he returned to Nineveh with all his consolidated forces, a very great multitude of warriors, and there he and his forces relaxed and feasted for 120 days. Judith chapter 2. In the 18th year, on the 22nd day of the 1st month, there was a discussion in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, about taking revenge on all the land, as he had threatened. He summoned all his attendants and officers, laid before them his secret plan, and with his own lips recounted in full detail the wickedness of all the land. They decided to destroy all who had refused to obey the order he had issued. When he had fully recounted his plan, Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, summoned Holofernes, the ranking general of his forces, secondly only to himself in command, and said to him, "Thus says the great king, the Lord of all the earth, go forth from my presence. Take with you men of proven valor, 120,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry, and proceed against all the land of the west, because they disobeyed the order I issued. Tell them to have earth and water ready, for I will come against them in my wrath. I will cover all the land with the feet of my soldiers, to whom I will deliver them as spoils. Their wounded will fill their ravines and wadies. The swelling river will be choked with their dead, and I will deport them as exiles to the very ends of the earth. Go before me and take possession of all their territories for me. If they surrender to you, guard them for me until the day of their sentencing. As for those who disobey, show them no mercy, but deliver them up to slaughter and plunder in all the land you occupy. For as I live, and by the strength of my kingdom, what I have spoken I will accomplish by my own hand. Do not disobey a single one of the orders of your Lord. Fulfill them exactly as I have commanded you, and do it without delay." So Holofernes left the presence of his lord and summoned all the commanders, generals, and officers of the Assyrian forces. He mustered 120,000 picked troops, as his lord had commanded, and 12,000 mounted archers, and drew them up as a vast force against for battle. He took along a very large number of camels, donkeys, and mules for carrying their supplies, innumerable sheep, cattle, and goats for their food, abundant provisions for each man, and much gold and silver from the royal palace. Then he and all his forces set out on their expedition in advance of King Nebuchadnezzar to overrun all the lands of the western region with their chariots, cavalry, and picked infantry. A huge, irregular force, too many to count, like locusts, like the dust of the earth, went along with them. After a 3-day march from Nineveh, they reached the plain of Bechteleth and camped outside Bechteleth near the mountains to the north of Upper Sicilia. From there, Holofernes took all his forces, the infantry, cavalry, and chariots, and marched into the hill country. He devastated Put and Lud, and plundered all the Resacites and the Ishmaelites on the border of the wilderness toward the south of the Chalaeans. Then, following the Euphrates, he went through Mesopotamia and battered down every fortified city along the Wadi Abron until he reached the sea. He seized the territory of Sicilia and cut down everyone who resisted him. Then he proceeded to the southern borders of Japheth toward Arabia. He surrounded all the Midianites, burned their tents, and sacked their encampments. Descending to the plain of Damascus at the time of the wheat harvest, he set fire to all their fields, destroyed their flocks and herds, looted their cities, devastated their plains, and put all their young men to the sword. Fear and dread of him fell upon all the inhabitants of the coastland, upon those in Sidon and Tyre, and those who dwelt in Sur and Osina, and the inhabitants of Yamnia. Those in Azotus and Ascalon also feared him greatly.